You are welcome to the monthly Money Matters Convo. So this is a platform where we have conversation around financial literacy, financial awareness, financial education. And 2024, we started in February. We started with Jeff Bedu. In March, we had Sammy Rabbit. In April, we had one of the finest financial literacy advocacy also on board. And today, being the month of June, we have someone that I've learned a lot from afar. I've been following I've been following his works, and it's kind of interesting. We have a lot of mutual friends. Sandra Davis,
Yes,
it's a mutual friend. Sammy Rabbits and all those financial literacy champions. So it's good to connect with you, and it's good to have this conversation with you. So basically on this platform, what we do is we get to know you more, get to know your financial decisions, and ask some interesting questions that will help us encourage the financial literacy conversation. And so that's what we are about to do today. So I will introduce you, and then from there we can zoom into our conversation for today.
yeah.
So my guest is an accredited financial counselor and a senior lecturer at the University of Georgia. His research focuses on financial empathy and self-compassion, data visualization effect on financial behavior, and the connection between brain function and money. His philosophy on effectively interacting with money can be summed up in his TED Talk, Financial Empathy, Understanding the Story Beneath the Numbers. And I watched this, and that was amazing. And so you can check his TED Talk on YouTube, Financial Empathy, Understanding the Story Beneath the Numbers, and you will learn a lot from that presentation. Utilizing financial empathy as a process for active listening and the creation of client-focused financial recommendations are reflected in two financial literacy and capability programs he helped create. And that is the Money Docs and Discovering Money Solutions. He's also the founder of Modom Solutions, a virtual financial coaching service he has been pioneering since 2015. He is also the author of the amazing masterpiece, Black Financial Culture, Building Wealth from the Inside Out. And you can get copies of these books on his website, www.blackfinancialculture.com. And so, ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome Dr. Michael G. Thomas, Jr. Doug, you're welcome.
I appreciate it, Peter. I think at the end of the day, I don't know. It always feels awkward to kind of like hear like stuff that you're doing when people introduce you, because you don't feel like you've done enough to receive any type of accolades or any praise, but I do appreciate it. But this is a marathon, as you have been running for quite some time. So I appreciate you, brother.
Great. So let's zoom into our conversation today. Can you give us an idea of how you grew up, and was money conversation a norm growing up?
Yeah, very, very good question. I grew up in a place called Gary, Indiana, that it's in the Midwest near Chicago, Illinois. So it's about 30 to 45 minutes away from Chicago, whether or not you're taking a highway or the train. When I was growing up, especially during the 90s, Gary, Indiana was top three in terms of the murder capital of the United States. So there was a lot of gang violence and things of that nature, and a lot of homicide per capita in the area in which I lived. So my experiences in Gary growing up were very isolating, so to speak. You always had to be very mindful about where you were, what colors you were wearing, how you were engaging with the surroundings around you. And it felt restrictive, right? It felt like you didn't really have choice. You didn't really have agency. And I know within this conversation of talking about finances and things of that nature, but if in your lived experience, you don't feel like you have agency or choice or control, and you have to take what you were given, then it's kind of hard to manifest that financially because you never really developed the capacity to think that there was more. And so for the longest time, money conversations weren't direct. They were more or less indirect as it relates to maybe what I would sense and pick up from my mom if we were struggling, or to see, or literally just seeing her and experiencing her managing the workload because she would work two jobs. I was primarily responsible in many instances for helping to take care of my sister, get us up in the morning, get us to school, get us home, take care of like breakfast and then like anything that my mom had set up for us so she would get home later that evening. So I would say that in terms of having direct conversations about money, most of my experiences and my internalization of finances in general came from experiencing my mom, and me internalizing those experiences in a way where I became very financially vigilant or money vigilant. So if we would think about this from the perspective of financial scripts and things of that nature, just being a saver, always considering the downside, not really the upside of things. So it still to this day, it's hard for me to spend. So I have to force myself to spend and enjoy money because that's a good thing as well. But the way that my brain has been wired, because it is a wiring of your brain at that point in time, that there's always risk. And money is kind of a way to stave off risk. So those were my experiences, generally speaking, big picture, more of just experiencing my mom engage with money and internalizing what that meant, which is crazy to think about that because I'm internalizing a money dynamic and a story at 7, at 12, at 13 with a brain that does not have the nuance and capacity to fully understand circumstances. But yet, those stories and narratives of my internalization become salient and become real to me, with a mind that doesn't have the capacity to fully understand, but yet so much of my life has been impacted by those internalizations in my youth. And that's been something that I've had to unpack, and consider things like bounded rationality around that, in order to create a new paradigm for myself, different types of self-talk for myself, um, and to actually engage in a process of rewiring my brain to not feel guilty enjoying money. And that's something that I've struggled with for many years as well. So, like, big picture, that's kind of been my financial narrative. Those things have never gone away. I still struggle with those things because it's my default mechanism in the way that I engage financially. But I've had to learn how to find joy with money without feeling guilt or shame or that some negative or bad thing is going to happen as soon as I spend it. And now I don't have it to take care of this bad thing that just happened. So it's calls for me to evolve in the way that I experience the world around me, which I think has been incredibly healthy.
Great, great, great. Our upbringing and the environment we grew up from mostly do have an influence on the kind of money decisions we make. So growing up, I grew up in a farming community and I watched my dad save money. I watched my dad work for money. And so that habit kind of became part of me. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, mostly some of these things, financial literacy, most of these things isn't taught in schools and all that. But then when you watch the people around you, you can learn something from them, and that can form your habits. And yeah, so growing up, the people we work with, the people we interact with, the people we watch, they have great influence on us with regards to financial decisions. And so mostly I tell parents when I'm having conversation with them, I tell them every money decision you are taking now, your child is watching. And so
Absolutely.
one day they will emulate everything that you did. So you need to make the right choices so they can learn from you. So tell us about your profession and what got you into that profession. Is it passion?
Yeah.
Is it career? Yeah.
Yeah. So my background, actually, if we go a little bit further back, when I was younger, we lived on 1207 Allen Street in Gary, Indiana. And in the back of the house, in the furthest room on the left-hand side, my mom had this box of books, and it was a summer. I was bored out of my mind. And for whatever reason, I went into that box of books and I found a random book that she had about money. And I was pretty young at this time, but it intrigued me. And I actually spent part of that summer sitting down and reading that book. And I can't remember the name of the book, but it stuck with me in terms of these notions about financial literacy and how you should manage money and things of that nature and engage. And that was probably one of the first direct conversations I had about money was through the book that my mom had in a box in our home, right? Which is kind of weird because we were just talking about experiences and how indirectly my mom purchasing a book she never directly shared it with me, but because it was available in the home, I came across it and it intrigued me. So in a roundabout way, she did have even more of an influence than she thinks she knows just by having information in a home that at the right time I would stumble upon something and then engage with it in a positive way. So leading from there, always wanted to just have, again, security, job security, financial security and stability, things of that nature. So I was fairly decent with math, and I loved understanding things about businesses and all that jazz. So I was like, well, why not look at accounting? It's a trustworthy profession. People recognize accountants and seek them out, and they make decent money coming out of college. And so I aimed my sights on it. And so that's where I initially started in my career. What I realized with accounting, even though that I could do it in college, was that I didn't want to spend so much time working with Excel sheets and looking at financials of companies. I started to realize that more of my gift was rooted in also the engagement and relationship. So I realized that even though I had this technical ability, I also enjoyed relationship in my work, whether it was the person I'm serving, whether it's relationship with colleagues. For some people, that may not matter to them. You know, they go to work, they show up, whatever. But for me, I am very much so a relational person. And so I picked up on that doing the work in the accounting space that I would spend a lot of time in isolation, working on doing the audit for a company, so on and so forth. And I went and I spoke to my teacher. I was like, hey, I'm not sure if I want to do this at the end of my junior year. And then we looked at some other options, and she ultimately said, well, if you change your major now, you're probably going to have to stay for another year. And I was like, I can't pay for another year of college at that point in time. So I stuck it out with accounting, did it for a couple of years, and then ended up transitioning into academia. And I've worked on both sides in academia. I've worked in the side of helping to oversee and run a financial aid office, as well as helping to oversee an admissions office and working directly with the registrar and advancement and all that good stuff. But in that space, so I dealt with in the accounting space, I dealt with isolation and not feeling really connected and not a whole lot. I didn't feel like my work was meaningful, if that makes sense. In higher education, working administratively, what I realized was that, yeah, this is great to do the work on the back end to create an opportunity for families to engage in higher education, to improve their upward mobility, given their career choice and things of that nature, and also mitigating the debt that they're taking on for their education. But what I soon realized too was that there were a number of students that I had worked with, them and their families, where not only did the son or daughter take out a student loan, because there was a gap in their financial aid award package, meaning that their award package didn't cover all of the expenses for school, then mom would come in and basically take out a parent plus loan to help cover the gap. But if mom did not have good credit, then mom would need a cosigner on the student loan. So literally for one semester or 1 year, you would literally have child, mom, and grandma all tethered to this student loan debt. And that's just for 1 year. And that's if they finish in 4 years. They might graduate in 5 or 6. But now this is generational debt relative to the career choice that son or daughter is engaging with and the capacity to effectively pay that debt off and to create the upward mobility and financial stability that was promised through college education. And that bothered me because I also understood in doing my work, there was a business side of it too. As a institution, you have to attract students. You have to generate revenue because you have to keep your doors open. So there was this balancing act that I was really struggling with. So in accounting, it was isolation, not feeling purpose. In the higher education, it was purpose, but not feeling like we were completely addressing the issue because I realized that college education wasn't enough. So then I was like, well, could I do work to position myself to where I can do more outreach and have more of the free time and flexibility to affect the lives of families long before they're making college choice and decisions that lessens the stress level and the dire need to take on a lot of debt for a college education to make up for these historical or past things. So we're taking the burden and pressure off the student. They don't have to make the same choices, don't have to take on the same level of debt, and still have sustainable upward mobility. And so that led me to ultimately saying, well, I want to do more work on the ground. I want to work directly with people. And that's what ultimately led me to exploring my master's at the University of Georgia in financial planning, and then ultimately going into the PhD program so that I could do more of the work that I wanted to do and feel as if I can do it in an authentic way and not be bounded by the needs of an organization in a way where I can't tell a family what I did. And that's one of the reasons why I transitioned from that role was I would tell families, I don't think that you should come here. I can't then go to my president of the college and say, I turned around, I told 30 of these students that were expecting to enroll that they shouldn't be here because financially it's going to have a disastrous effect on the financial situations of this entire household, not just the student. And so that's what ultimately got me into the teaching side of higher education because it provides you more flexibility. You have more intellectual freedom to explore things and ideas and do practical research in areas that you not, and I think this is very important when we talk about research. When you're doing research, we're looking for the truth, whatever that truth is. Now, my observations may lead me towards one direction, but I can't allow bias to come in and influence the truth, because if we can't tap into that, then we can never get to an actual solution. And we're just reinforcing bias even in research and not realizing it. So I just wanted to do work that had integrity, that's gotten to the truth, so that we can actually move the needle and not just standing on talking points or methods, methodologies, or whatever it may be. And it's just the same conversation that we've been having since the 1890s or 1860s about family household management and how there needs to be more effective financial literacy and education. this conversation is not new.
Yeah.
We're in the 2000s right now. We were having this conversation in the 19th century as well as in the 18th century. Think about that.
Yeah.
Right? So there has to be more to this. And the closer we get to the truth, then my hope is as we get into the 22nd century at some point, then we're not having the same conversation. So the idea is to work myself out of a job at some point.
Great. Great. That's amazing. So after I watched your TED Talk, I realized the work that you are doing is really unique and it's authentic. And you came into this space with a lot of integrity and compassion. And that is what is needed. And so if you are doing a work and you are throwing your whole being into it, it makes the impact more real. And so thank you so much for doing this. And it really inspires a lot of people. These are some of the things we learn from. These are some of the things we get hold of. And that this is what keeps us going. Sometimes I just look at what some of you are doing and I'm like, yes, we will really impact, change the world. Yes. So
Peter, I feel that way about you. In terms of like the work that you're doing, the constantly being on the ground, constantly driving financial literacy, constantly working in communities, constantly advocating, like the feeling is mutual, clearly, but I feel like your work and your efforts have been absolutely extraordinary in terms of its sincerity and real desire to help the communities that need it the most. So again, my hats off to you as well.
Yeah. So this work came from a real life experience. So after watching my granddad go through a lot of financial frustrations and he's sharing his story with me, it was kind of real to me. So I decided to be that light. I decided to take his message and help other people. So yeah, this is something that is so dear to my heart. I'm very passionate about this whole financial literacy conversation and education. So my next question will be, how does your work contribute to the bigger picture of driving financial literacy education?
Yeah, I think that the biggest way that my work contributes, it's just being consistent about awareness around this topic, quite honestly. I don't own financial literacy. There yourself and so many have come before me in terms of this work that's being done. And what I can do is just find a space within all these other extraordinary people to shine a light. And as a collective, hopefully that light shines brightly and it provides direction. It provides a sense of hope and optimism about the future for individuals, even if they can't see it for themselves. And so for me, my goal is just simply to be consistent in the work that I do, to ask different questions. So for instance, even with the Financial Empathy TED Talk, that's asking a very different question, because if we go back to the 2000s and in the decade of that followed it, there were a lot of narrative on financial shame. We were literally shaming people into trying to make good choices. And so when we talk about shame, if we look at literature, there's healthy shame and then there's toxic shame. My issue with shame, though, is that it's become so toxic that people can't differentiate between healthy shame and toxic shame. And if that's the case, it triggers the same type of emotional response in amygdala in terms of I need to hide. It's a fight or flight response. This isn't now a response of how can I be better? How can I grow from this experience? It's how do I hide from this experience so I'm not seen? And then sometimes individuals in our communities will shame us in such a way where we feel as if we are the mistake as opposed to we made a mistake. Think about social media. That's our culture. Like if somebody does something, the first thing people do is they attack their character. You know nothing about this person. You know nothing about their context. You know nothing about their situation. You know nothing about their financial scripts, their desires, their needs. Whether you agree with them or not, those things still come from somewhere. And then sometimes someone may have a want that to them feels like a need. And we need to understand that I can't see that unless I understand context.
Yeah.
But we're so inundated with information and having an opinion and wanting to be first to say something that no one really slows down to say, allow me to see you so that I can help you.
Yeah.
Right? Because if I can't see you, I'm basically transferring my identity onto you and then telling you how I would help myself. But that's within my own context, not in the context of the person I'm serving. Right? And then that's where we kind of miss steps, miss barriers, and miss things that that individual's dealing with that could potentially prevent them from achieving said goal. So for me, that's always been a huge part of my experience in navigating this process, serving individuals, serving communities, and literally wanting to kind of nudge the paradigm of finances from a shame-based financial culture to an empathetic financial culture. Now, empathy does not mean complacency. I said this in a TED Talk, and the reason why I included that there, because I felt that where the tension would be in having this empathy conversation is that if I'm being empathetic, I'm accepting of someone's behavior. Empathy is not accepting of bad behavior. It's understanding where that behavior is coming from so that we can think thoughtfully about solutions to mitigate the behavior. It's not an acceptance of the behavior. It's not an acceptance of a thing. It's a deeper, intimate understanding of the thing. And so for me, this work that we do is very relational work. Again, that whole notion of relationship and connecting with people. And I feel like that's how you affect change. It's not just the information that you provide. It's people, it's that information landing on fertile soil. That soil is not fertile if it's hard and it's rigid because it doesn't want to allow anything in. So money change is heart change as well. So if I can change your heart, I can change your experience with money. And so that's where that empathy piece came in and kind of that notion of trying to change the narrative around this stuff.
Great. So I with this whole financial literacy conversation, I find coaching to be a key part of it. And so in 2021, what I did was, together with Sandra, we created a course, Financial Literacy Community Advocates, and we trained 20 people who are passionate about financial literacy. Some of them were already having their projects around financial literacy, but then we inculcated in them the art of coaching. And so here you are able to put yourself in the person you are engaging with, in their shoes. You're able to understand their situation before you even recommend certain financial actions and decisions for them. And so it's critical for we as advocates, we as educators, we need to also align ourselves to be coaches so we can understand what a person is going through and guide them through their journey. We don't make decisions for them, but we guide them to make their own decisions. And so it's really important, and that is really spot on. And so this question, I'm really interested in this question. As a senior lecturer at the University of Georgia, do you incorporate financial literacy into your teachings? If no, why? And if yes, how do you go about it?
Yeah, very, very good question. So I teach close to 1,700 students every semester.
Great.
Roughly, let me do the numbers. About 1,500 of those students
Great.
are financial literacy students. So I teach a
Awesome.
class called Intro to Personal Finance. And so it's a gateway class. So it's a class for an individual to just learn the things that they need to learn to take agency over their own financial life, what they hope for, their dreams, things of that nature. And then also it's a class or a course for individuals who may be interested in pursuing a career as a financial therapist, a financial counselor, coach, or a financial advisor and planner. So it's really, and it gives people enough to say that, hey, I like this career track, and let me see how I can explore it further. To the second part of your question, how do I teach the class? I teach it from a holistic perspective. So very similar to the start of how we started this class. We talk about money scripts and where they come from with students. And so I actually encourage them to have conversations with the parent and even go as far back as a grandparent to actually trace the thread of certain things. So it's a kind of like this building the table type thing that we do, where I ask students, hey, what messages, either directly or indirectly, did you feel like you grew up with around money? And then so they would write those messages on top of the table, right? So that's their table setting. And then from there, we have the legs to the table. Then I asked them, well, where did those come from? Who said those things? And then so they would have three prongs of the table, and we can do four if they have at least three messages. And then they would have to thread those messages out. So who said that message? Mom said that, dad said that, grandma said that. And then what I would have them do is to actually, I give them a script to actually engage in a conversation with mom, with dad, with grandma to understand where those messages come from them.
Great.
Right.
Great.
And then so now what we start to see is this historical family pattern of messaging that's
Great.
rooted somewhere. And then what I do is that on the very back end of the question, at the very back end of the assignment, I tell them that, hey, let's now kind of think about you as being the prongs for the next generation of your family.
Yeah.
What financial messages do you want to send up through the family line? You actually have a choice.
Yeah.
So that's where we tap into that agency. And then I tie that into everything that we're learning in this class is actually going to help inform being aware or having awareness about the financial messaging, the financial habits and attitudes that you have, and what you want to pass on to the next generation, So before you ever start, it could be a choice if you're aware. Because otherwise, if I'm not aware, I will very casually pass along narratives and ways of thinking and ways of doing without even understanding where those things come from.
Yes.
And it could be the most random thing in the world. Like grandma, for whatever reason, was without a job. And then she went and started using alternative lenders. And then it was so delayed that it just became a part of the family dynamic where we started using alternative lending for whatever reason. And I've just always done it. I don't know why I do it, but that's just where I go first. That's the narrative like you're talking about.
Great.
So now what we're looking at is we can't address what we're bounded by unless we understand what we're bounded by or were bounded by. And then so we start there. And then I talk about the neuroscience of money. We talk about the amygdala in a brain, flight and fight response. We talk about the parietal lobe in a brain, which is our Rolodex of lived experiences, right? That justify and validate our emotional experience. So it is true. Okay? To tell somebody that their lived experience is not true is not accurate and it's not correct because there is truth in their lived experience. The question is could it be different? Right? So then we start talking about the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that allows for us to slow down and think and consider new ideas and possibilities. We talk about the impact of dopamine and cortisol and epinephrine and all these other different things in the brain that actually trigger emotional responses that impact your choice. So your choice about money in many instances is a neurological chemical that's helping to drive an emotion that you've developed an adaptive response to, and you don't even realize that this entire system is working. And that leads us into the notions of heuristics in terms of how we make decisions, right? And then from there, we get into the more technical side of things. We talk about systems theory, family system dynamics. We talk about financial literacy from an individual perspective, but then we also talk about it within context of relationship. So me budgeting by myself is very different than budgeting with someone else. So I just can't prepare you to budget in isolation. I have to prepare you to also to be able to budget or create a spending plan in relationship. And that's where empathy and compassion and all these other different things come in. So literally, just about everything that we utilize in the financial space, generally speaking, I bring it into the classroom, I dissect it, I unpack it, and we try to get as close to the core or the root cause of the issue. And then we build the financial information from there. Because for me, it's not about money. Money is a conduit to a need, to a desire, to a hope. So if I can make that need, desire, and hope, or the core of something, so clear and salient, and say, well, this is how you get there with money, then that individual is more or less incentivized to do the right things with money because it's aligned with something that's very clear and unique to them. No different than what you were talking about in terms of the process with coaching that you and Sandra worked on. Like all this stuff it's the same scope. So my goal within that class is to really get to the essence of things. And it's not just about information and financial information. It's if money is the leading cause of divorce within relationships, why is that the case? So now we start talking about vulnerability and financial intimacy and being seen and judgment and shame within the context of a relationship and how there can be bids of connection through the way that we engage with money. And we don't even know that's what's happening. And then I, for whatever reason, block my partner from this emotional bid that's connected with money. And now they don't think I love them. Right? But it's so much more complex, right? So that's the spirit of my class. It's like, this issue isn't just money. It's our inability to communicate our needs, desires, hopes, dreams, and fears through this medium that is money. It's not money in and of itself. So let's work on how do we develop effective communication skills. But how can I communicate effectively if I don't even know what I feel and why I feel what I feel and where that comes from? So then we bring in the emotion wheel to identify emotions and drill all the way down to understand where that comes from without judgment, guilt, or shame, right? And then unpack it for the moment to understand where that is, but then also to move from it gradually to recognize that we're no longer bounded by the same circumstances, situation, limited information, social capital, so on and so forth. So it's a very holistic class. It's not just here's a budget, this is how you manage debt, this is how you invest, or whatever it may be. Even with investing, what's your emotional capacity to handle volatility? How much are you investing? Is it creating stress? Is it not creating stress? Do you really know your investment? Or are you just familiar with your investment? Familiarity is, oh, I know that company. I see it all the time. I'm familiar with it. I don't know the company. Knowing the company means that I've seen their balance sheet, I've seen their income statement, I know their cash flow, I know their executives, I feel comfortable about their business model, how they're pivoting. I know the company. So if I know a company, it's going to be easier for me to stay invested even with market volatility. But if I'm only familiar with the company, right? If there's market volatility, I'm selling because I don't know the company well enough, or I'm not intimate enough with the company to stay course. So let's really talk about the root cause of the issue in terms of why people buy high, sell low, so that you understand it. When you see it in yourself, you can slow down, self-regulate, and choose an alternative path if you choose to. But at the end of the day, it is your choice. And that's my saying for my class. It's your money. Do whatever you choose to do with it. Just own the outcomes. And from there, we can pivot and grow, even if we make mistakes, because everybody makes mistakes. Nobody's perfect, but you have to see it without judgment and guilt, so that you can actually process it and then consider how might I move forward differently. So I'm preparing them for these other elements that life throws at you that we
Great.
never really talk about, that becomes a barrier that they don't know how to navigate. Let's
Yeah.
just go ahead and address it in this class. I'm giving you the keys on how to navigate it ahead of time if it happens. And that's how I approach the course.
Great. That's very comprehensive. Very, very comprehensive. That's great. So one thing we are doing at the Center for Financial Literacy Education Africa is we are working with universities to encourage more money conversations. And just like I said to you earlier with Valentino, we are setting up research centers, financial literacy research centers, so we can encourage financial literacy conversations, encourage economic decisions that will benefit the people. And just recently, we were guest lecturers for investing in Poland. And one thing we have realized is most of the concepts are general, but then it changes with geographic locations or the environment. It is specific for certain environment. And so let's say for compound interest is a general concept. But then how you apply compound interest in the States will be different from how someone in Ghana will apply compound interest.
Absolutely.
How you invest in stock in the States may be different from how someone will invest in stocks in Ghana. And so what we are also doing is we are trying to create that global conversations so we can connect investors, connect the students so they can share information among themselves, learn from other cultures, learn from other environments. So holistically, they will get to understand what is happening around the world. And that is something that I think we can see the possibility of collaborating on some of those conversations in the near future. Now to my most personal question. Yes. So I want to know your 3 most financial mistakes that you have made since you started making money decisions. So 3 of your, let me say, most financial mistakes, yes.
Okay. So I would say probably being young and dumb and not being able to emotionally regulate and see the big picture. I pulled, I want to say roughly $10,000 or more out of retirement accounts in my 20s to help purchase a brand new car. In hindsight, thinking about it, I didn't need that car, quite honestly. It didn't provide me any joy or utility. It didn't get me any more girls or anything like that. I wasn't getting any girls at that point in time either. So like it didn't do that for me.
Sure.
So that was not the best decision in the world to make. Another decision, probably, let me think about that. Pulling some money out early was one. When I was in college, I I didn't keep my check registry.
Okay.
So at that point in time, I'm a little bit older, like I'm in my 40s. So during that point in time, you still had to verify whether or not the ATM machine was updated based on your transactions, even if you swipe with a card because there was a delay. I grew too trusting of the ATM machine. So some friends of mine wanted to go to Atlanta and have a good time that weekend. I had a sense of how much money I should have had in the bank. But when I went to the bank and I checked my balance, it said that I had a lot more money. And I should have thought to myself that, you know what, all that money can't be there because I've done some other spending here. But my brain was like, oh, there's money in the bank. We're going to Atlanta and we're going to have a good time.
Yeah.
So I ended up, I ended up pulling money out, and then the bank updated the registry on the bank side of it, and I was in a negative balance, and I had like 100 and something dollars of fees. And I was like, how is this possible? So I went to the bank and we went and had this conversation. And it was at that point in time where they were like, hey, there's a delay. This is in your terms and conditions. It's your responsibility. I was like, but that's not fair because you all are telling me that this is my balance and this wasn't my balance. But I knew inwardly, though, it was still my fault too, in terms of not keeping up with that stuff. So not tracking my finances, pulling money out of the markets way sooner than I should have. And then probably, I'm not honestly, beyond those two. All right. So maybe investing in a meme coin on blockchain technology, thinking I could flip
Okay.
$250 and so
Okay. Okay.
it's like $300,000 overnight. And that
Okay.
didn't work out. I lost a good bit of that $250.
Okay.
So that was probably no more meme coins for me. I'm
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. 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 These are some great lessons that I think, yes, such mistakes can hinder your financial progress. So now your top three financial advice. Top three financial advice.
Top three financial advice. Um, Probably one would be get off of social media, create some space to where you don't have many outside influences, and then take some time just to get to know who you are, what you want, what you desire, what brings you joy. And once you even write those things down, ask, where does that come from? Why do I want this thing? Why do I think it brings me joy? Has it ever really done so in the past? And if it's no, and it's no, and it's no, then why? Then why? Where is this coming from? Why do I feel this is? Because what happens a lot is that we live our financial lives mirroring the lives of other people,
Yeah.
thinking that their joy is going to be our joy.
Sure.
And if they're living authentically, you're not going to find joy in their authentic express life. Where you find joy is in your authentic express life. So for me, personally, I have a fancy car or anything like that. I drive a 2005 Toyota Camry. Um, but that doesn't mean that I don't spend money. I love books. I have a book right now on investing in US financial history that I'm
Great.
working through and all that good stuff. So for me, going outside, going to a park on a beautiful day in the early morning while it's cool, sitting up against a tree or at a bench, just sit out, that gives me joy and contentment. That may not give you joy and contentment, but I'm okay with what brings me joy and contentment. And so I can allocate my dollars in ways that really I can get the utility and the benefit from those dollars that I'm expecting to get because those dollars are an accurate reflection of the things that I value. And so that's an important piece of it. The second part of financial advice would be understanding that perfection is not required. You don't have to be perfect in navigating your financial journey. In fact, the very process of growth is about taking two steps forward, taking one step back. And then ultimately you get to the point to where you take 5 steps forward, you may take 2 steps back. Then you're taking 10 steps or 15 steps forward, and you're taking 3 steps back, or maybe fewer steps back. But there's going to be this gradual ebb and flow, but you're still trending up as long as you keep going and celebrating where the progress is and where the growth is. Relapse is a part of change. And so we all have moments where we relapse. That's not to suggest that you are not worthy of achieving a financial goal. So that's a really, really big thing. It's a part of actual growth. So if you've relapsed, that means you've actually done something outside of your comfort zone to relapse from. That should be celebrated because you're developing new habits. You're actually transforming your brain. and you're actually going through what actually is a growth process. So perfection is not required. And then I think that the last thing is that consistency is the only thing that compounds.
Yeah.
Um, you can't start and stop, start and stop, start and stop, and then expect for there to be growth. So compound interest only works consistently over time. Okay.
Yeah.
So in understanding that, consistency is the basis for which we build things, whether they're positive or even they're negative. If it's negative, I'm consistently doing something in some circumstances that's causing this to happen, or the latter. So the big thing for me is to create space for yourself internally and externally so that you can
Okay.
consistently work towards a goal. And if you do that long enough, what happens is that you start producing dopamine because now you've earned the reward and you've actually have triggered the appropriate type of dopamine because that's what dopamine is there for. Dopamine is a neurological chemical that is produced to help us to work towards attaining a thing, right? So then you feel the euphoria from, oh, I saved $100 and I set out to do this. That feels really, really, really good. And now you want to
Yeah.
save the next $100 and then the next $100. And it literally transforms the way you think and you get excited about these things in ways that your
Yeah.
former self would not have the capacity to do it. But the only way to get there is through consistency. So understanding that whatever you set out to do, I tend to encourage people to start with baseline. So it's not start small and it's not start big. It's
Yeah.
start at your baseline.
Yeah.
So let's assess where you can do that comfortably. And then from there, we gradually build,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a stretch, not too much of a stretch, so you never get the dopamine hit. Because what's equally worse is that if you add too much stress to your life and you quit, that can produce dopamine too.
Yeah.
So you can actually get a euphoric high, a dopamine hit from quitting. And that's how quitting then can become habitual.
Yeah.
So we need to be very, very careful about how we align our goals so that we're triggering a dopamine in the correct way with consistent behaviors. So the last thing would be is create a space for consistency. Perfection's not required, so you don't have to run as fast as someone else. I just need you to start to run at your pace, at your level. Because generally speaking, especially with using a metaphor running, if you start at baseline, after about 2 weeks, your body starts to crave running. And you actually start running further and faster than you ever thought that you would be able to run. Just by simply starting slow, there's this exponentiating effect that transpires. So those would be the main things that I would discuss, as well as Peter following someone like you to get the appropriate information that you can effectively apply in your life, and then utilize those three things that we discussed to help nudge you along as well as your family and community towards prosperity.
Great. Great. So get to know yourself, get to know
Yep.
your values, and remain consistent.
Yep.
So yes, this is the funny part. I have a couple of words, so I'll mention them and just say what comes to mind if you hear those words.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm
So I'll
listening.
say money,
Opportunity,
great. Marriage,
joy.
car,
Say what again?
car,
Car, liability,
savings,
purpose,
spending,
with spending, I think that for me, it would be structured. I don't like to, me personally, I do not like to spend without having a plan. Um, because what I've learned for myself is that I want to be intentional about my spending because I get more joy when I'm intentional. If I'm spending mindlessly, I never get joy out of doing that. I just end up with stuff that I didn't want and provide no value. So I like being very intentional. So when it comes to spending, structure works for me.
Great. Niece.
Say that again.
Niece. Niece.
Hold on, Peter. Are you saying lease?
Niece.
Niece.
Yes. Your niece.
Okay. Oh, yeah. I would say Brooke is caring.
Awesome. Once. Your once.
My wants,
Yes.
self-denial. Peter, I was just having a conversation with my wife the other day about something that I wanted, but immediately moved off from it.
Okay.
And she was like, I don't think it's fair. If you want something, you should get it. But I was like, well, we got to take care of these other things. I can't want something and they got stuff that I need to take care of. Right. So, yeah, interesting. So, anyway,
Great. Great. Budgeting.
budgeting. Actually, I don't like the word budgeting. I like to use spending plan. Anything that moves away from a negative connotation and promotes more agency and not boundedness. So when you say the word budgeting, to me, it oftentimes just comes off as constricted.
Okay. Okay. Goals.
Goals. I basically would say goals are like stepping stones.
Okay. 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 Net worth.
Net worth, not
Yeah.
close enough.
Cash flow.
Cash flow. I love
Yes.
cash flow. I like to see money grow. I don't like to see money go. That's just how I operate.
Awesome. Awesome. Employment benefits.
Employment benefits. Undervalued. I don't think that sometimes we often understand
Yeah.
if you're in a position to where you have health insurance and like here in the United States, if you have a high deductible plan and things of that nature, you can have a health savings account. And then sometimes your employer will help fund your health savings account. These are significant benefits that go understated that are provided by employers. And then sometimes I definitely think that they're underappreciated at times.
Great. Great. So I think we should take maximum advantage of our employment benefits. Yeah, if you understand them, you will utilize them well. So that's
Huge.
investments.
Investments. Love it.
Yes.
I love the idea of when I think about investments, I think about human capital. So I don't look at investing as if I'm investing in a company. I'm investing in the human capital of the company because a company
Great.
is made up of individuals and people who are driving towards a common goal. So I love investing because it says something about extraordinary people, hardworking people, diligent people that are trying to make something happen. And so I get excited about investing in projects and things of that nature that embody that spirit of camaraderie and perseverance towards a goal.
Great. Great. Insurance.
Insurance necessary.
Great. Estate planning.
Trust.
Trust.
I think that what we oftentimes I think that what we fail to realize about estate planning, that estate planning is it's even deeper than money because it exposes deep family emotional wounds as it relates to our relationship with people who might be heirs or legatees of our resources. And if there is no trust, or I'm distrusting of family members and things of that nature, how can you effectively create an estate plan? Because now you have to address issues of lack of trust in order to begin a process. So that can uncover wounds that are deep-seated wounds, deeply seated wounds that I don't think we often realize that we have until we have to say, in the event that I'm no longer here, this person gets X. I don't know. Right? Or they can have horrible financial habits.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now we have to address the very thing now that I never had a conversation with you about, that we all see about your ability to manage or not manage money. It forces people to actually have real conversations about things that otherwise you would just completely avoid.
Yeah.
That's a crazy dynamic, right? So this notion of trust and being able to deal with discomfort, not just with death, but then also with how you have uncomfortable conversations with family that you've been avoiding for so long.
Awesome. Financial independence.
Financial independence. When I think about financial independence, I think about a expression of identity. That would be the best word, because financial independence can look very different from one person to the next.
Yeah.
It's a unique thing to someone in terms of what that looks like for them. So it's an expression of authenticity and identity that can be expressed through financial resources.
Great. Great. And my last word, abundance.
Abundance. Decision.
Great.
I think that abundance is a decision before it ever becomes a position.
Yeah.
And so abundance can just be simply the way that we sow into the lives, like you do, Peter. You're doing that abundantly. That's a decision. It may not manifest itself financially in certain ways, but that's abundance. I can be abundantly joyful and cheerful in the way that people experience me.
Yeah.
Right. So abundance is a decision. I think that that's a character thing, and we can choose to be abundant in the way that we engage with the world around us. And you know what magically happens, Peter? When we are engaging in a spirit of abundance, people are magically attracted to you.
Yeah.
People want to be around you. People
Yeah.
want to see you be successful. People will invest in you. People will buy products and services simply because you've already made a decision before it was ever a position. So decision before position.
Great. Great. So modem solutions. Modem solutions. So that will be my final word. When you hear modem, what should come into the mind of people?
Yeah, the great question. Modem solutions, it comes from the Bible, actually. It comes from Ecclesiastes 7, 11, and 12, which basically says that money and wisdom can get you almost anything in life, but wisdom is the only thing that can save your life. And so when people hear that, um, it's this notion of money in and of itself and only money. Money without wisdom is a liability. And that's what I want people to consider and think about. So just because you have money, but if you don't have the wisdom with it, then it doesn't necessarily get you to the place where you thought it would get you. And so wisdom is as equally as important as money is. And then the more money you have, the more wisdom you need to effectively manage those resources. So that's what I would want people to think. Don't just aspire for money, aspire for wisdom as well.
Amazing. 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 It has been a great conversation with you. And we are so grateful having you on today's show. A lot have been shared, a lot have been learned. And I believe people will get value from today's conversation because a lot have been shared and we are so grateful. And so before I leave you, any final words, any big ups, the floor is yours.
Yeah. No, the only thing that I would say is for folks who are following Peter, um, continue to support him and engage with the extraordinary work that he's doing, because it is extraordinary. And so I guess the final words are really just from afar to give you your flowers for the extraordinary stuff that you were doing in your community and wanting to do that abroad. It's incredibly powerful. It definitely is a light, brother. And I just want to encourage you to keep shining.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And we are grateful. This is how we end today's section of Monthly Money Matters Convo. Watch out for July edition of Monthly Money Matters Convo. Thank you very much and stay blessed. Bye-bye.